our agenda. We will call you when that item comes up. If you'd like to have just some general comments, we'll hear you at this time. Please fill out a green card available at the front desk, and you'll be given up to 3 minutes to speak on an issue. The first public speaker I have is Michelle Frazier.
Can I come up there?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Morning.
Good morning. One thing I wanted to direct was the attitudes of the bus drivers. And this isn't about the bus drivers that are nice, because there are several that are wonderful, but we have a lot of really very nasty, mean, terrible bus drivers that won't even speak to you. I've seen drivers refuse to help elderly women when they ask them a simple question, turn out the window, pull away when you're about ready to get into the bus. I mean, when you talk to them, they'll say, well, you people this, and I'm like, you wouldn't have a job if it wasn't for us people. I mean, really. I feel like they just don't have any morale, that they are just about hating their jobs and not wanting to help us, and that's the reason they come to work, is to help us. And I believe that keeps people from riding the bus. I mean, it scares the heck out of people that are old, It scares the heck out of me. And when they act like that, I'm just thinking maybe they need some people skill classes, or, because it's not good for PSTA. If you want people to ride the bus, they're not going to ride very much. People are just being that rude and crude to them. And also wanted to speak about drivers, the buses connecting when, that's kind of a general thing. I guess I shouldn't put up in public like this, because I didn't expect this. I'm going to write it down. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And ma'am, could you speak to Mr. Bradford here and give him the route numbers that you are concerned about? Do we have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I got it.
Mr. Newton?
Yes, do we do something like this, the secret shopper or the secret diamond? Do we do any of that stuff for quality control for that, random stuff, or do you just wait for people to come and tell you that problem?
We're actually launching a secret shopper thing like I think you're describing right now. We're perhaps working with people in the community to ride our buses and give us reports, give us assessments. And we're also doing launching a new customer service training initiative with the drivers, as she described.
Yeah, that's not to throw them under the bus. Yesterday, they had a driver appreciation day. To hear that, and I always want to receive a termination, but we have to inspect what we inspect, because I'm pretty sure it's exception, not rule. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move to the next speaker, Morgan Swin. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Morning.
I've been riding the PSTA transit since I was 18 years old. I've been using it all the way from Clearwater all the way up to Everett College. I went to SPC in Clearwater campus, and as I graduated from there, I used the bus to get there every day. And as I went to Everett College, where I graduated from in last year in December, I continued to use the bus to get around downtown, even though I was on campus. And even after graduating, a year from then, I've been using it to get to downtown, get to my workplace and all that. And I've noticed in the last I'd say in the last 6 months or so, there's been a real increase in the bus just being so overcrowded and people being so unable to even, it's not even an issue of personal space anymore. It's just we physically can't pick people up. And I'm talking specifically about the 19 route that I've noticed. I'm sure there's, I've heard from, other people on the bus, other routes, but 19 is the one specifically, obviously, because it is the most used. But I've seen instances of, bus users calling the helpline on the bus, complaining directly on the bus because they're so fed up with not being heard. And, my experience was about 3 weeks ago. I was on the 19 bus going south to Grand Central Station, and there was about 3 separate people on the phone, and the bus, they're yelling at the bus driver, they're heckling him. There's not much he can do, but, if there's people on the bus, I understand, but it was just really disheartening to see just a total wall put up and not feel as if, he didn't even offer a number, or, people who were asking, could I have, and all that. And so it seemed very strange, the disconnect between the transit and, the purpose of it is to help the people. And it's almost as if people don't understand how absolutely important it is for these people who have no other transit. I mean, I personally don't have a car, and I haven't been able to afford one until very, very recently, and so without the bus, I don't know if I would have been able to go to SPC, to go to Eckerd, even such a high institution that I got scholarships to attend. So it's not just a, lower income problem. It's not just, even though I'm going to be getting a car soon, I'm not going to stop using the bus. I'm not going to give up on, helping. So I just wanted to make it known that it's, people from all areas are very concerned and continuing to be concerned. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Flynn, thank you for those comments. Congratulations on graduating.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate those comments. Increasing capacity is very important to PSTA, and the customer service issues you brought up will be addressed. Thank you so much. The next,
Pass the referendum.
yes, that's very important.
Do we know the specific times? I know it's the 19th, but there's specific times and day that the voting is occurring?
Or Mrs. Flynn?
I think she's going with, are you going to cover, get the details?
Yeah, I'm gonna get some.
Okay, we'll get that next step. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I have Sully Grasso. Is that the first name?
Well, he's the only one this time to me.
Okay, you don't have a subject, so are you speaking in general or
Correct.
to an agenda item?
Correct. General.
Okay, so you'll have 6 minutes total. Tom Ramsey. Speaking for himself and Sully Grasso.
Yes, thank you, Tom Raps, Unincorporated Seminole. I brought up before that the quality of the PSTA meeting videos is poor. The picture size is too small to see the slides, and often they'll say buffering, and they don't hang indefinitely. But what's even more of a problem is that the viewers can't go to the portion of the video they want. So if they wanted to review a certain portion, they'd have to go back and watch the whole thing all over again. I suggest that you put the videos on YouTube instead of streaming them from the PSTA server. That hosting account may not be set up for this. As it is now, I have to rely on videos posted by Mr. Grasso, and those videos do address all the issues I brought up. But there's no reason your official meeting video can't be as good, at least, as that of Mr. Grasso. Last month, on another subject, last month I brought up bus passes as a metric, and I suggested that you use monthly bus pass sales as a metric to measure PSTA performance by. And no action was taken by the board, no comments were made, so I'm going to press the issue a bit. Mr. Miller and I actually had a nice email conversation. We agreed that the monthly bus pass sales are about $3,000 a month. So if you increase bus service by 65%, as you proposed to do with Greenlight and Nellis, you would assume that you would get at least that increase, or even more, because there are synergies claimed for this increased bus service. But I don't think you're going to get that, because when you cut bus service a few years ago, it was because you had too few riders on these routes. If you don't want to use monthly bus pass sales or ridership as a partial indication even of PSTA's ability to attract recurring riders, then I would ask, what will be your metric? Now, I want to touch briefly on a sensitive subject, which I did not bring up here. Mr. Welch did last time. I only brought it up to you by email. And that is the issue of corruption. I have no indication that any of you have listened to the interview with esteemed Harvard Law Professor Lawrence Leslie. What he talks about is legal corruption. Corruption of the political process. Those of you who are elected officials on this board swore to uphold the Florida and U.S. constitutions when you took office. In addition, every voter in Florida has to take an oath to protect and defend those same two constitutions. So when you corrupt the political process, which I think you have done, then you're committing a serious offense, although it may not be a criminal offense. And that is the angle I come from. This is a plan that was not developed with any meaningful critical input from critics. And it makes you feel any better, I've said the same to others who are involved in this process, that this is a corruption of process. And I wonder, why does real estate development drive all economic development and transit proposals in the Tampa Bay area? We have government for the people, not for the developers. This young lady who left here talked about the services for the people. We're supposed to have government for the people. And between self-driving cars, Lyft, that's spelled L-Y-F-T, companies like Flight Car, they're in Boston and San Francisco, we are going through a transportation revolution. And this plan doesn't account for that. I would argue to you that dissent and free speech is how we get better outcomes and we get economic growth, which is what we want. Not by having plans that simply are, let's call them developer-centric. And I'm well aware that when we have heated arguments and we trade barbs, we get away from the policy issue at hand. So let us turn back to the policy issue at hand, which is the Green Light Pinellas Plan. I viewed the video of the discussion in the ACBT meeting yesterday regarding how Green Light Pinellas will work with the gateway connector. Ms. Jalski was asking about whether PSTA had accounted for, quote, the road. I think the more salient question is whether they've accounted for the project. It is the gateway connector project, the entire project, not just the 7-foot increase in the Overton flyover. If Ms. Borchers, while she was at Jacobs Engineering together with Mr. Pringle and other Jacobs staff, had such meetings where they discussed how to integrate Green Light Pinellas with the entire gateway connector project, then there would be records of those meetings. There would be records of what issues were covered. And I would urge you to please look for those records, and then we'll find out whether it was accounted for or not. Now finally, on the issue of population projections, I learned from NPO yesterday that their official population projection for 2040 is 1.12 million. But that is based on, if you look in their footnotes, that is based on there being development around 16 light rail stations. Then the alternatives analysis takes that projection and says, we need transit because we're going to have population growth. We don't have population growth there. As we've shown, the projections in the past of population growth have been wrong. So this is this kind of logic. We're going to have transit. We're going to have population growth because we're going to have transit, and we need transit because we're going to have population growth. And that's why I and others say this is a false premise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rask, and you did that perfectly, just under 6 minutes. I'm not going to try to do a counterpoint every time you come up here. You know that we disagree on these issues. For the record, there are several points, though, you made. This has not been a corrupt process. I understand you're trying to spin what you actually wrote in the email, but you didn't say that we were corrupt as PSTA commissioners. This is the most collaborative plan that I've seen in Pinellas County in the 13 years that I've served on the county commission. In terms of metrics, this board will determine the metrics that we use to evaluate the performance of PSTA. And as for the video, our staff has looked at the issue of the quality already. I talked to Bob South about a month ago, so that is very good. I have no other cards. Let me just make sure. I have no other cards to speak on general items. Mr. Evers, I will call you when we get to that agenda item. Commissioner Newton.
Yes, I would like to say as one of the elected officials up here, the beauty of the democratic process is everybody will get the opportunity to vote. So if you feel the way or you have some kind of scenario or illusion that things are being done wrong, you got a right to vote against it. That's the beauty of it. Everybody will get a vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Dutton.
Yeah, the USF, based on the U.S. Census, has estimated that the population of Pinellas County will be increasing by about 100,000 by, I think it's 2035. Broken this down, the preponderance of the increase will be seniors. I think it's either 55 or 65 plus. So it's not just MBO that is projecting increases in our population.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. The only item is the February 26, 2014 board minutes.
Move approval.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Action items 4A, our 2013 audit report. Brad.
I'd like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Debbie Leas, to introduce our auditors.
Good morning.
Good morning to the board. This morning we have the auditors here who are going to be presenting our very first comprehensive annual financial report. We have the draft that is in each of your areas there along with your presentation. And what a comprehensive annual financial report is it takes the audit report and adds a lot more statistical information to it. And this will help us as we go through the rating agency process, as we start looking at alternatives for how do we fund our projects going forward. And in the CAFR, as we call it, our 4 sections, the introduction, financial, statistical, and regulatory, which at this point we really don't have anything since we haven't issued bonds. We talk about financial trends in the statistical section, including revenue capacity, demographic and economic information, and operating information. I'm very, very proud of the staff to be able to put this together in such a short period of time. They've done a yeoman's job under Michael Hansen, Marnie Maxwell, Nelson Doherty spent a lot of time expressing thank you, and we've had a lot of support from our auditors to help us through this first-time process. And I would like to introduce them at this point. We have Laura Brock, who will be doing the presentation, and I will turn it over to her now. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Laura Brock, I'm shareholder with Mayor Hoffman McCann, and we are delighted to be here to present the results of the 2013 audit for the PSTA.
Good morning, Laura. Nothing like an audit in the morning.
I wanted to just mention that we did meet with the Finance and Performance Management Committee on March 13th, and we went into quite detail the information that's included in the financial statements, and had a lot of questions and answers that we were addressed at that time. I did hand out a presentation that we can quickly go through. I've been asked to make this very short and sweet, and so I'll attempt to do that. As far as the 2013 financial statements, as Debbie indicated, this year was a little different, but in addition to performing the audit on the AFR, the annual financial report, you chose to put together a CAFR, and she walked you through that a little bit, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So this will be a first-time submission for you to GFOA to receive the Certificate of Achievement Financial Reporting Award. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into that, and she rightfully so gave acclimates to those that were involved. In the statistical section, which is in the back part or in the latter part of the financial statements, there's 10 years worth of statistical data that had to be dug up and created to be able to put together. So it was quite an endeavor to put this together. And the challenge was whether or not we felt like we could get this done and accomplished for fiscal 13. There was a push to do so. A lot of folks didn't think that that would happen, and fiscal 14 would be a better scenario. But they moved forward and charged forward, and we worked back and forth to kind of get through and go through the checklist and make sure everything was completed correctly. So that will be submitted, and we'll keep our fingers crossed as the first time submitter that you'll get that Certificate of Achievement. I have worked with other government entities that have accomplished that, so that will be a wonderful thing. So I just wanted to point that out, that there was quite a lot involved to complete that process. As part of the audit, we issue our auditor's report, which is an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements. Included in your CAFR is the management discussions and analysis, referred to as the MD&A. And just to remind you that it is unaudited, we go through and read it and make sure that it's reasonable, but we don't audit the information, the numbers that are in the MD&A. The financial statements, the basic financial statements, includes the statement of net position, statements of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position, a cash flow statement, and then there's a variety of footnotes that we're required to disclose and put in the financial statements as well. After that section, because you do receive federal and state awards, we have to do more than just a financial audit. We have to do what's called a compliance audit or a single audit. So we go through and we select certain grants that we have to test, and then we have to issue additional reports on internal controls and regulatory reports. So we've been able to do that as well. Then you've got a required supplemental information section, which is other information relating to your OPEB and your pension requirements as far as funding and required contributions. And then the statistical section, which is the new part that's in your financials this year. And again, I want to just thank the finance department for working with us to accomplish that and get that done. As far as the regulatory items, we issue an audit report. It's the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. There's 2 internal control reports that we have to issue, and we've issued both of those without any comments for material weaknesses or findings. There's also a schedule of findings and question costs that's required to be in there. The CFA, which is your schedule of expenditures and federal awards and state financial systems. We did follow up on the prior year findings, and then there's a management letter that's required to be submitted to the Auditor General for the state of Florida. There's certain assertions that we have to make in that report as well. We're in the process of finalizing the NTD report, which is the National Transit Data, which is a separate report that we have to sign off on, and we're in the process of finalizing that as well. As far as following up on the comments last year, I stood before you last year and reported that you had some issues and some concerns relative to the audit. We did issue in last year's audit report a material weakness, which is not a good thing by any means. So a material weakness is where there's a breakdown in the controls within the financial reporting, and it had to do specifically surrounding the grant areas. The CFA had several changes that were made during the course of the audit. There were some grants that had been overlooked that should have been on the CFA. And as a result, when we issued our report last year, if you remember, we had written you up on that. And I'm happy to say that this year, when we took a look at all of those issues and concerns, they had all been corrected. We didn't have any areas that we needed to report to you today that you were deficient in any of those areas. We did not have a significant deficiency last year, but we did have some recommendations that we brought to your attention last year, and those had to do with your information technology. When we come in and look at your IT, we're looking at user access controls and reporting controls to make sure that, passwords and backup and all these things are appropriately taken care of. And last year, we had reported on some access approval controls that we didn't feel like had been corrected, and that had to do when employees leave the employee of the organization, their passwords need to be deleted within the system, and there were some approval processes that we felt like you were deficient in. When we came in this year to do our IT review, we found that all of those had been corrected as well. So I'm happy to report that that deficiency or that recommendation has gone away as well. As far as findings and concerns that we had in the current year, I'll give you a gold star. We didn't have a material weakness or the deficiencies or any other recommendations. So your team and your staff have worked very hard to correct the issues that we had last year, to work on the CAFR and get all of that statistical information and make sure that we dotted all our I's and crossed the T's. And so we're happy to report to you today that you have a good report. This is a quick summary of your statement of net position for the current year. I just want to point out a couple things. Again, this was elaborated in detail with the Finance Committee, Performance Committee. Total assets increased about $15 million, primarily due to the new buses that you had acquired that are sitting in capital assets. And also, you noticed the receivable line item increased, and that was because there were some funds that were due to you as a receivable from the grant funds for those buses, so there was an increase in that line item. In looking in the accounts payable, you see there's an increase in accounts payable. Again, that has to do with the buses on the accrual for the buses that you had received that you hadn't paid yet for. So we had about a $5 million increase in the accrual for the buses. So as a result, your liabilities increased from $9.9 million to $15.3 million. In your net position section, you see you increased primarily in the investment in capital assets. That went up about $10 million. And again, that's a byproduct, if you would, of the capital assets of the buses that you had acquired. The good thing to point out is that your unrestricted net assets has remained similar and constant with the prior years of about $37 million. The next page is your statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in net position. And this is just giving you your revenue and expenditures and a snapshot again for the fiscal year ended 13. And you can see your fare revenues, although we're showing a modest decrease, about $240,000. That's really due to the presentation of the funding source that you had received funds from the Transportation Disadvantage Grant. In the middle of last fiscal year, the way those funds came to you used to come through another group and then to you, so they were considered fare revenues. They eliminated that intermediary, and it's coming straight to you through the grant funding, so that's now reported as grant revenues. So the change is really insignificant because it's just being reported in a different section. So that's the only difference there. Looking at your expenses, you see that your expenses increased primarily in the categories that you see the increases. They're due to wages and benefits and costs related to human resources. So your operating loss was about $54 million, and then you get your other revenues, which are property taxes. We have a very slight decrease in the property taxes, which is a direct result of the property value decline. You notice that the capital grant revenues is substantially higher. It went from $1.1 million to $15 million. Again, that's from the funds that you received to acquire those buses this past year. So overall, you had an increase in your net assets of $10 million, which is a very favorable operation from your results. This is the same information. Some people see things better in pictorial as opposed to numbers. So this is the same information. Looking at it in a graph presentation, you can see the swings and the changes between your expenses here and operations. You can see how maintenance is kind of around the same numbers, and then you can see the different changes there. Same thing on the next slide, which is under revenues. And again, you can see the peak in the capital grants. And that's just a function of when you receive those monies. And for example, this year we saw that there was $15 million that you received for your grants. The next slide, this is just some information. And now that you do have a CAFR, a lot of this information is included in your CAFR statistical information. We've been presenting this to you for the last couple of years. We just wanted to point out the changes in your property taxes over the last couple of years and what you're projecting or budgeting for fiscal 14. And you can see those numbers. And the big increase in 2012, when you had your change in your millage rate, when you switched from 56.01 to 73.05. The next slide is, just going forward, we spent a little time at the Budget Finance Committee, or Performance Finance, talking about moving forward in the GASB statements. And there are a few statements that are coming forward that you need to be aware of and that you'll be working with. And most of these have to do with your pensions and your OPEB, your other post-employment benefit plan. And so we've got GASB 66 and 67 coming forward next year. 68 is the big one that's going to affect most of the organizations. And then there's an OPEB GASB statement that hasn't yet been issued. It's going to piggyback 68, but it's the same information for like the pension, defined benefit pension plans and the FRS plan for the OPEB. The exposure draft is due to be issued in April of this year, so next month. And the estimated issue date is supposed to be June the 15th. So we'll stay on top of that. We'll work with your finance department to make sure they get the information that they need so they can properly account for these changes. Other questions, comments?
Thank you for the audit. Great report. I know our chair of the finance committee has some comments. Can you go back to slide 25? Just wanted to point out
25?
the fare box recovery.
It's,
It's a page 2.
10.
Page 10.
Got it.
I've got numbers all over the place. I got 25. I know what that means. Just wanted to point out that we have, in fact, increased the percentage that our actual riders are paying towards operations from 20.9% down in 2009 up to 23.6%. But I think it's high when you look at transit agencies around the country. Is that correct? So when you hear folks saying that our riders don't pay their fair share, we have actually increased the percentage that they're paying. So I just wanted to point that out on that slide. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. And the committee did receive a actually more extensive report. We're getting to know Ms. Brock and her staff fairly well. And I would just say on behalf of our finance committee that we're very proud of the staff for completing the CAFR and the unmodified opinion this year. And the committee voted to recommend to the board that the board accept the audit review.
Take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Morano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on the board last year, and probably someone asked you this question. But what was the reason for the fare box revenues decreasing from 12 to 13?
That has to do with the timing difference. I don't know specifically why there was a change in it, other than when we look at the accruals at the end of the year and the end of the year.
Brad,
I don't have that
do you have any answer?
specific answer.
Are there less people traveling on the buses from 12 to 13?
No, I think the reason that the ratio went down slightly from 12 to 13, and Ms. Brock mentioned this, was because of a certain kind of revenue we receive from the transportation disadvantage. We provide a discounted bus pass to low-income people, and until sometime in 2012, that came through the MPO and was counted as fare box revenue, even though it is actually grant funding from the state that subsidizes those low-income bus passes. And then we took that out of fare revenue and placed it now that we get the money directly, it doesn't flow to the MPO anymore. Now it's called grants. It's an accounting.
Right, it was the change in the revenue source, and that changed in the middle of fiscal 12, and then so the entire fiscal 13 year, you didn't have that money sitting in the fare box revenue line item.
Actual revenue from customers flows directly with ridership, and it was up. As ridership was up.
Okay, thanks.
Ridership is up when we raised the fares a few years ago, so both of those are constant.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? I have no citizen comments, so we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Dyke?
Yeah, I would just recommend the statistical section of the CAPA to the board. Believe it or not, there's a lot of interesting information in there. One of the more interesting ones, it shows that as the per capita income in the county has risen over the past 10 years, so has ridership, which is different from what we've been hearing. As there is more unemployment and so forth, the ridership picks up. But it also picks up under other situations where you're actually getting higher incomes, which would indicate to us that there's something operating here other than just economic need. There are people that are really preferring to use the bus rather than other forms of transportation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dyke. Any other comments? Commissioner Newton?
Yes, did you find any, in your report, any corruption or anything like that?
You don't have to answer that.
Nothing came to our attention regarding that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton.
Well, we will go ahead and finalize the audit. We just received today the representation letter from management, and we'll be getting an update from legal counsel relative, we have to get that up to date, so we should be anticipating to issue, today is our report date, to get the financial statements prepared and bond issued.
Well, I kind of jokingly said you don't have to answer that, but you do look at fraud
We
and
do.
control issues in your
Absolutely.
audit.
And nothing came to our attention that we
Okay.
need to discuss.
The CAFR will be available electronically when?
We're hoping by Friday.
Okay.
Once we insert those letters that we're getting from you, get sign-offs from your legal counsel, and we can
Okay.
put it all together.
Thank you, Ms. Brock. We appreciate it. Did we vote? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimous. Thank you all, and thank you, our staff, for a great job. Next, we move to 4B, which is the concrete project closeout.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I too would like to just acknowledge not only Debbie Leas, our CFO, but Marnie Maxwell, our accounting manager, and Mike Hansen, our budget director. They did a great job, and to get no findings, and her audit report is pretty awesome. So thanks to them. Perhaps moving a little bit into a not-so-awesome area, on page 30 of your agenda is an action item today to approve of a settlement, $195,000 settlement payment to Pepper Construction to close out the concrete project. Although, as I stand here today, I will say that it is a settlement agreement that I'm recommending, but it does not completely close out all discussion. I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'll just quickly go through, and then I'm certain Mr. Evers from Pepper Construction will want to speak to you. As you recall, this was an agenda item, an action item last month on your agenda for the same $195,000 settlement, and we pulled it at the last minute because we did not, Mr. Evers had not agreed to it. Mr. Evers has committed, is standing by his verbal agreement to agree to the $195,000 settlement, but it is not a complete deal as it stands here today. And so that's why I think you have to consider whether you want to do this or not. So I have a PowerPoint here. The concrete project, just as a quick summary, is a $9.1 million project that is completed. It was effectively managed. It was completed on time, under budget. Pepper did a very good job in completing the concrete work around the building. The project achieved substantial completion back right around Thanksgiving, and then the final payment, including all the retainage, was made on December 31st. On January 22nd, Pepper sent PSTA a summary of approximately $1.1 million in claims over and above the payments that they had been given. $1.1 million. The $1.1 million, which actually is on my table in my chart, as $1,077,000 that they claimed, can be categorized into two categories. The first category is $166,000 or almost $167,000 for soil remediation work that Pepper believes they did to remediate soil contamination that they did not cause. That's what Pepper believes. It's $167,000. They want us to pay them for soil remediation work that their employees did for soil contamination that they say they didn't cause. Then the rest of it is other, I would say, miscellaneous claims. And that's the bulk of it. $925,000 is for time extensions and other claims that they have. I repeat the same chart I just showed you. Back on February 4th, PSTA agreed to pay $47,000 of the other claims. So the real total value of what Pepper's asking for is just over $1 million. On January 21st, and PSTA and Pepper have been negotiating since November, talking back and forth about a final settlement payment to close out all of the claims, all of the $1 million in claims. PSTA offered $150,000 as a global settlement to cover all the claims, including the environmental soil remediation work. Pepper did not agree to that. It balked at it because they didn't want to include, and what they told us was they didn't want to include the soil remediation claim. They were willing to negotiate on the other claims, but they were not willing to negotiate on the $167,000 soil remediation claim. Perhaps it was not the right negotiating strategy, but I said, okay, let's try to come up to a deal on the other items and leave the soil remediation off to another day. And let's just see if we can come up with a settlement, which we did on February 4th. We verbally agreed, and Mr. Evers had told me yesterday he would stand by that agreement, that on the other issues, besides the soil remediation issue, we have reached an agreement that is your recommendation for you to approve today of $195,000 down from his initial claim of 925, essentially, of 195. However, as of today, Mr. Evers will say that what he would like is a global settlement that includes the environmental settlement. The 195 does not settle the environmental claim, the soil remediation claim. And what he would like is for a larger number that encompasses everything. Let me just go back a little bit in history and update you on the soil remediation issue. Last June, the PSTA board, you got a presentation on this, and you approved a $190,000 payment to another company called HSA that we spent to clean up soil contamination caused by pepper, a fuel line spike that their employees spiked a diesel fuel line and oil spilled, and we spent $190,000 of PSTA money. Did I lose my PowerPoint?
Just the one screen.
Okay. We spent $190,000 of soil remediation work on our side of the ledger. At the same time, Pepper says they spent $167,000 of soil remediation work in the same general area of the facility, of work beyond what it took to clean up the soil contamination caused by their fuel line spike. They say that they cleaned up other contamination, and they have studies that they believe show this. PSTA also has done studies and soil analysis, extensive analysis, and we feel very comfortable that all of the work that Pepper did ties to the soil damage problems that they caused. I point out also that my third bullet points out that Pepper's insurance company actually paid for Pepper's expenses related to that fuel line spike. And Pepper's actual expenditures was only their deductible of $20,000. It's actually their insurance company that paid for the fuel line spike expenses that their workers remediated. Again, the reason I felt very comfortable with carving out the soil remediation issue from the settlement, because Pepper wouldn't agree to that, was because I felt very comfortable with the tests and the legal advice we had been given about where PSTA stood as far as defending a claim that might come from Pepper that we owed them this $167,000. I do not believe that we owe them the $167,000. The work that they're claiming was caused by oil contamination that their fuel line spike caused. At least that's what our tests are showing. That's why I felt very comfortable. At the Finance Committee in February, I said, and I maintain this position, that despite PSTA expending $190,000 of our taxpayer dollars of our expenses on top of the contract to clean up the oil contamination, I don't intend, and I'm not going to recommend to the PSTA board that we go after Pepper to get reimbursed for that $190,000. That's within the budget. We've already paid for it. We have a clean site now, and we're ready to move on. And in my mind, the 190 and 167 were even. And so, as we stand here today, we are relatively even. And this 195,000, I thought, could essentially constitute a complete settlement. But it does not. At least my understanding, it does not. So to summarize this, I know this is complicated. The recommendation that is before you is a settlement to pay Pepper $195,000 additional funds out of the concrete budget that is still within the total project budget. And essentially, Pepper may still seek any action it chooses on the soil remediation claim. They might file suit or do whatever they want to do on the outstanding $166,000 environmental claim. Last point I want to make is that Mr. Evers, I believe, sent an email, letter to each of you complaining, or not complaining, I would say providing constructive criticism to PSTA's project management techniques. And he gave a 7-point suggestion list. And I just want to say that we have taken that very seriously, and I've sort of accounted for that. Frankly, I think we believe and agree with all 7 of his suggestions. Number 1 is to make sure you hire experienced construction managers. And certainly for Green Light Pinellas, we are going to have more than 1 experienced project managers to manage those projects. Number 2, hire a construction engineering inspection firm. We plan to do that, especially under Green Light Pinellas. Number 3, don't use owner direct purchases like we did on this job. And I certainly agree with that. That was a mistake that we made, and we haven't done that on any of the projects we've done since then. Number 4, improve our change order process. That's in progress. Actually, Debbie Leas, our CFO, is working on improving that process within our purchasing division. Number 5, don't use the EMR insurance ratings in the bids. For those of you on the PSTA board 3 years ago, you remember there was a bid protest over insurance ratings. We've done away with those in our bids. Number 6, use RFPs, don't go low bid. In some cases that does make sense, not all cases. And number 7, keep the lawyers out. Of course, I wrote I don't agree, but Doug and I maybe perhaps agree on that issue in many cases. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I know Mr. Evers wants to speak as well.
Well, we appreciate that, Brad, and we do love our attorneys. Different when they're yours. So what you're recommending is that, we need that PowerPoint. We have background information, but it's in a different format than what we just saw.
Yeah.
And I like the way you laid it out there. You're recommending that the board approve the $195,000, understanding that Pepper may or may not accept that because they want the $167,000.
They want 195 plus 167.
So we are approving something that may or may not be accepted by Pepper.
Correct.
But you're still recommending 195?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or comments before we hear from the public on this? Commissioner Barkley?
I'd like to hear from either Mr. Zimmern or in-house counsel whether or not it's a wise idea to approve this when there's still further litigation going on.
Awesome.
Counsel?
Well, first, there isn't litigation. Nobody's filed suit at this point as we're attempting to resolve issues. And I think, in speaking with Mr. Miller and this land this week, the strategy is to hopefully still continue to work with Mr. Evers and see if we can, based upon the board's approval of this proposed settlement, forward a settlement with him, with your approval. And so we would ask that you approve the settlement, and then we would continue our discussions with Mr. Evers and hopefully reach a meeting of the minds that is consistent with what you approved.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor. Commissioner Podolsky, are you ready?
That answer my
Okay, Commissioner Rice.
Has Pepper been clear about what exact work they did on the soil remediation? Because if we hired HSA to come in and fix it for $195K, and then the Pepper's insurance company reimbursed them except for the $20,000 deductible, I'm confused about what they actually did that they want us to pay for.
Okay, I'll try to summarize in less than 30 seconds. There was a fuel spill, there was a fuel line spike in 2012 by Pepper workers. Everybody agrees on that. It caused diesel fuel to spill out onto the soil. Pepper's forces did do a lot of work in that general area to dig up the contaminated soil, remove it appropriately, and clean it up. And in the process, they did a whole bunch of tests. And they believe, after the fact, that the tests that they had done revealed that not only did they clean up the oil from their spill, but that it cleaned up a whole bunch of other oil from other spills that had been done by PSTA or, our fuel delivery people or whatever, that they didn't cause. And they quantified that as $167,000 worth of remediation that they did for oil contamination in the soil that was not caused by them. PSTA also had its testing firm do a whole bunch of tests and identified that the oil from the 2012 Pepper spike contaminated a much greater area than what Pepper believes. And so we spent $190,000 with a separate company to clean up the soil. Bottom line is, as of today, it's all cleaned up. It's just a matter of who pays.
Thank you. Let me make sure I have Commissioner Newton. Who else did I see on this side? Commissioner Long, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to figure out, this 195, is this what they said they spent in addition plus the $20 deductible? Is that how we get to this 195 number? You said
No,
165 and then, as Charles just mentioned, $20,000 insurance, deductible. Is that how we get into this 195?
I can't say there was that mathematical formula to the 195. It was a negotiated number. They started at $1 million or 900 and something, and we started at 0, and we reached an agreement, I would say, on the non-environmental issues, the non-soil at 195. The soil and the insurance and all that, that is separate.
So if you can clear up something for me, you just said that Pepper said they found other oil or other contaminants in that area that they say PSTA may have spilled. So where the pipe was broken, is that a filling station or was this somewhere they were digging?
On the relatively north side of the PSTA property, we have several fuel lanes. We fill the buses and they run on diesel fuel. And we have diesel fuel tanks, and then lines go from the diesel fuel tanks to like a gas station essentially on property that all the buses get filled up every night. And it's right in that general area, all the concrete was replaced throughout that whole area by Pepper, that they hit one of those diesel fuel lines and ruptured it.
I just back to that, I know Lee said it was okay, but I find it hard to believe if we still got potential litigation going on and we're doing settlements. We've authorized them to pay almost $200,000 in money. I don't understand that if it's not a settlable thing altogether. I just don't have a problem with that. Now, legal's saying it's okay, you recommend we approve it, but it's still potential. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I know you're still working with them, but it's still potential for maybe to sue the other monetary stuff, requests to come out of this. So why are we approving money?
Right,
When we approve this, is this approving a final settlement?
No.
Is that?
From my understanding from Mr. Evers as of last night, no. No, it's not final.
So if we approve the 195, as Commissioner Newton said, there's a chance that we might come back with another settlement agreement?
It's potential, yes.
Okay.
Now, one more question. You said this morning that you particularly had a deal or a verbal agreement, but not anymore. What's going on there?
We started out trying to get a final deal, a final payment that would cover all claims. We were unable to reach that. We were able to reach an agreement on all claims except for this soil remediation claim.
167.
167. So the recommendation of 195 is, would, I believe, and Mr. Edwards is committed to this, close out the 3 or 4 other, the majority in value of claims, but he has said he's unwilling to settle or close out the soil remediation claim, and he wants to pursue whatever avenues he can to be reimbursed $167,000.
So if this board does the 195, it's just a good faith effort, is that what it is? If he's still pursuing more.
Perhaps, yes.
For the 167, yes.
I'm just trying to figure out, if only out of this 167, I guess it's 20,000, what, I mean, that's gonna make them whole. Why would we be just selling on this amount?
Well, I put that in there just because I think that if we are to pursue the, if there's a suit or a claim on the 167 soil remediation claim, it's not only Pepper that we will be negotiating with, it's their insurance company. Their insurance company, who actually paid for the work, will be involved against PSTA.
Okay, now where does, one last question, Mr. Chair. Where does million come from? The insurance company paid $1 million? What's this million one? Where'd that number come from?
That was a documented claim. That is a number of documented claims that Pepper submitted toward the end of the project that they say we owe them because of additional, they claim, additional work that beyond the contract that they did. But that essentially has gone away if, and 195 is the agreed upon number for that work.
But normally change orders cover additional work. People just don't do charity, and that's usually approved, right? Isn't that, if it's above and beyond what we contracted?
Yes.
It's a change order and the board approves it, is that usually the way it works?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton. Commissioner Long?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I had a few questions for Brad, but the more I hear him answer the questions from my colleagues, I really would appreciate an opportunity to hear from Mr. Pepper so that we have the whole
He
story
has a card filled out.
from his
Mr.
perspective
Evers will be speaking.
before we continue dialoguing back and forth. Because,
Well, he
yeah,
does have a card filled out. When he comes up, I don't. I think we should try to get into a trial mode.
right.
Try to disseminate fact and fiction. He'll have his 3 minutes, but I think at some point we need to decide we're going to take staff's recommendation, or we're going to say, no, we're not going to approve this, go back and try to settle this. So this one, he does come up, I think that's the way we should go forward. Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brad, is the 167, is that what Pepper's insurance company paid out?
Yes, we believe that their insurance company, they filed and they got that reimbursed by the insurance company.
Shouldn't we be having this discussion with them?
Our risk management department has reached out to them, and yes, I mean, I think that's one of the issues at hand. It's one of the reasons we don't believe we necessarily should settle with Pepper on that issue.
Right, because I mean, potentially if we did, then the insurance company could subrogate against PSTA, so we could be
Potential.
double jumping there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Commissioner Welch. I'm not real up on all of this, Brad, so my question is, what happened was they had to clean up dirty soil. So they had to go in there and scoop it all up, put it in dump trucks, and then what? Where'd the soil go?
They have to, and I'm not an expert on this either, they have to take it to a special site that can handle it
And they have to
clean
pay
it.
for that.
Yes,
They
it's
have
more
to pay.
expensive if it's contaminated, if it has diesel fuel in it than if it's just regular soil.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they would have submitted that to us. Their bills for taking the soil to a decontamination place or a special place, they would have submitted that.
Well, again, their forces caused it. So they did that, they paid for it. Their insurance company paid for it.
But they would not have given us those bills.
That's right. We don't think we owe them anything.
I understand that, I just want to know where the special soil went.
But they did then send us $167,000 in bills because they said, well, this soil that we removed in this special way was contaminated by diesel fuel that was not caused by our
I
puncture. It was
understand that
caused
part.
somehow.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to know if they submitted the bills for disposing of that soil.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rice.
Yeah, quick question. Once Pepper identified that they were cleaning up past spills, not the spill that they were responsible for, did they fill out a change order or notify PSTA of what they were doing differently?
That's one of the issues and there's a whole bunch of requirements that Alan can expound about the proper notification and whatnot. It's all very involved with the testing. They do sampling of the soil and tests, and then there's certain kinds of tests that are called forensic tests that can somehow date the oil in the soil. Speaking way beyond my knowledge, to try to identify what the oil, they find oil in the soil, where did it come from? Try to figure out if it came from 2012 or it came from some time before.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Commissioner Lotbala.
Thank you. The issue before us is a settlement on all the items other than the soil contamination. And I think we're getting way down in the weeds on this. I strongly support the settlement agreement on $195,000 and let the staff work through that.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
It's, I don't want to ramble a minute longer.
Please do. Did you get the second?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure it's that. Okay.
There is agreement between the vendor and ourselves on the $195,000. Let's get rid of that, clear that off the table, pay the settlement, and hopefully we're finished. But our eloquent attorney and Brad will take care of the rest of it and bring it back to us if there's anything that we need to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Lotbala, for the issue. Commissioner Dayton.
Yeah, I support this, but I remember when this came up, it was in June, and we had maps and diagrams and so forth, and it seemed at that point that the decision on who was responsible would depend upon the forensic reports, which I would imagine we received.
We have.
And so what was the decision about them? Are we arguing about who was right or who was wrong, or what did the report show?
I would say we are in an argument mode about, because Pepper has their own tests, and we have our tests, and
so
scientists don't always agree on stuff, I guess, is what I would say, but we feel very comfortable with our analysis that we've done.
So are these?
We believe that, we believe we're comfortable with the test results that show that when the fuel spike, when the pipe was burst, the diesel fuel not only contaminated soil in and around that area, but it traveled along where the pipe was, or where pipes were, and spread out over a larger area.
Brad, let me just interject. Counselor, are we going down a path on the soil contamination that we might end up litigating? Do we need to not talk about that issue?
I can't tell you not to talk about it, but I think it would be best that, we might get into the details of our reports. Generally, we have shared, as Brad, generally what our reports show, that's all Pepper has given us. We have not gotten any detailed information from their experts.
Since that's an issue we might be going to litigation on, I think let's stay away from the soil contamination details if we could.
Yeah, and so
I have the same question.
All that I just said to you, I said to you in June a year ago. Yeah.
And I just point out, if any board member wishes, we can certainly meet with them individually and provide them, answer any questions on that.
Speak up if we're going down the road that
I will.
should. Okay.
So then we're arguing about $20,000.
No?
No.
167.
167.
Oh, understood. Okay, let's try to bring this in. Commissioner Long.
I've written my questions down, so given the advice from council, I'll just state it in case it comes back in the future.
Commissioner Diamond and then Vice Chair Johnson.
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Miller and Mr. Evers for working together to try to bring this to a resolution, even though there is obviously a dispute without incurring significant litigation costs. One of the things that I also want to compliment you on is the fact that you've responded to his specific concerns in terms of the project management issues so that we can take these as lessons to learn for the next time we have to engage contractors to help us with issues. I guess my own comment, I'm supportive, I agree with Commissioner Lavala, of trying to resolve as much of the issues as we can without litigation. And I guess my only concern or suggestion to council as they work through the agreement is whenever you have a settlement agreement where there's a carve out as to we're settling all these issues except for this, I think it's helpful to be very clear what we're carving out, and if there can be agreement between the parties that the maximum amount that Mr. Evers' firm might assert against PSTA going forward would be $167,000 with regard to the soil remediation issues. My concern is just that, you know, if we're unable to resolve that piece of the dispute and they come back and say, well, you know, we have some other claims out there that weren't totally resolved in the settlement payment of $195,000 from PSTA. So I'll leave that in your hands, Mr. Zimmet.
And we do have a draft settlement agreement that has gone back and forth, and we do identify the soil remediation claim. We actually included the specific amount, which Pepper then deleted from in their comments back on the agreement. They wanted to delete the amount. So that's part of our attempt or the dispute that's occurred over the last month or so in attempting to work out the resolution on the settlement agreement with carving out the soil remediation claim.
So I guess that goes right to my concern. So in other words, is there still a dispute as to whether the carve out will be capped at $167,000?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Diamond. The settlement agreement will come back to us for final approval.
If there's additional settlement.
If there's a change to the terms as you're approving today, if they agree to the 195 with the carve out of only the soil remediation claim capped at 167, you will not see it again. If it changes or if we resolve the soil remediation claim, we will bring the agreement back.
Where is the actual wording for the settlement agreement? The actual document.
That document,
We've got an agenda item that talks about it in summary, but the actual agenda that will be executed.
I thought we gave it to them. Did we not give that? Was that not on the board agenda last time?
It might have been on your agenda last time. We make sure it's posted and available in the agreement.
Let's verify that we had it last time, so that every commissioner has it. Commissioner Johnson?
The point I was going to make is just the boundaries of the settlement and the fact that, as I understand it, Pepper has not fully agreed to sign off. They haven't signed the agreement that we would approve and add our signature to at this point in time.
Correct.
So there's some uncertainty, as there was last month when the Finance Committee originally looked at this. We thought there was certainty on the settlement, and that is why we recommended to the board that they sign off. Although we acknowledged and received some comments from Pepper at that meeting. But we had recommended approval of the settlement agreement, assuming that it was a jointly negotiated agreement.
Thank you. Commissioner Woodjowski?
I just think that there's a good point here that we also have a committee or finance board who is working with staff and they've heard all of our comments and concerns here today. So I rely on the great leadership of Bill Johnson to make sure that as you continue to review this issue, that they will have heard our comments and make sure those things are covered and vetted fully.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodjowski. Okay, we have a motion and a second on this. We do have some citizen comments, so if we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and hear from the public. Mr. Doug Evers.
Yes, good morning. PSTA board members, my name is Doug Evers. I'm the Executive Vice President of Pepper Contracting. As you're aware, my company performed the concrete pavement and security upgrade project, total budget of about $9.1 million. Last month I described some of the extraordinary positives about the project, so unfortunately we're kind of focusing on the negative end of it here, but in many ways it was a very successful project. Last month I described that my company had over 3 years invested in working with PSTA staff and being intimately involved in the operations of this facility. I expressed to the board that this project in 33 years of construction was the most dysfunctional and adversarial project that we've ever been involved in. I explained to you, or to the board, that in July of 2013, my partner Terry and I met with Brad Miller and James Bradford. We provided them this binder of documentation describing in great detail the dysfunction and the adversarial approach of the PSTA project team. I want this board to be aware that Pepper's been very consistent in our position with Mr. Miller and with PSTA. Included in this binder was a tab section that dealt with the remediation or the contamination that we discovered on your property. We discussed at some length with Mr. Miller and Mr. Bradford the extent of that contamination and how the whole remediation effort had a very significant impact on the project. We also discussed way back in July of last year that we were looking to PSTA for reimbursement of our costs to clean up your existing contamination. We timely submitted an invoice and a very detailed package in August of 2013. I want the board to be aware that PSTA staff has never responded to that in any kind of an appropriate way. One tactic that was used was to say that you have offsetting remediation costs. However, after multiple requests to PSTA to provide us any information about that, we've never been provided one stitch, not one piece of paper. A few months ago, to escalate the issue, we requested a resolution meeting. Again, no cooperation. We were told by staff, specifically Sangeeta Land, that she would not even schedule a resolution meeting. Now, after the project's fully completed and all the other issues are being resolved, the PSTA is asking to carve this issue out of the settlement and just kick it downfield. It's clear to us that all of this is just avoidance behavior and not wanting to fairly address the issue. My request, and I said this last month as well, that this issue needs to be escalated. It should be removed from staff because it's obviously not going anywhere. There's a mediation clause in the contract, and we are respectfully, kindly asking this board to direct that this issue go to mediation and let's get it resolved. I want to quickly comment, if I can. Pepper turned in last year, not this year. We turned in August, very timely behind that meeting with Mr. Miller, a documentation package that itemized all of our premium costs to build this project, which is a whole other topic, but it was an itemized package. It included our job cost records. It was very detailed. There were some huge costs that were incurred because of the events that occurred during the course of the project. The other thing I want to make you aware of, in June of last year, PSTA, excuse me, PSTA project manager Mark Knight told the board PSTA encountered areas of contamination starting in the summer of 2012. Mr. Knight explained that once the large area of concrete was removed, existing contamination in the soil rose to the surface, showing evidence. This is way before our accidental spike of an underground line. So you need
Mr. Evers, stop you right there. I think we understand your opinion and we appreciate your correspondence and you being here today as well. Are you willing to accept the 195 for everything other than the soil contamination issues?
Yes, we've been very consistent on that.
Thank you. The mediation clause, what triggers that?
I'm trying to get a copy of the agreement.
Okay.
It's simply,
Well, let me just get our counsel on that. So the item before us is the 195. We got a motion and a second on that. If you can get the answer on the mediation clause and bring that back to us, if you can today, if not, via memo. I think the board needs to understand that piece of it.
I think one of the staff members wants to get me.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? We do have one other public speaker. Commissioner Dunn.
I have a question. It sounds like there's an agreement that this settlement carves out the issues with regard to the soil remediation. Is there agreement as to the maximum exposure as to PSTA as to what that would cost? I've heard the number $165,000. And I understand from Mr. Zimmet that was put in the agreement, and then your company won't agree to that number. Is there agreement on that number in the agreement?
very fair question. As I indicated, we submitted that invoice package last August. We have a small amount of additional costs, $10,000, $15,000 in order of magnitude since then. That's the only reason we left the value open, but I'm totally comfortable with capping the amount.
Okay, well, I'll just say I would feel much more comfortable supporting the motion knowing that there's going to be a cap in the agreement.
Can I follow up with
Yes,
that then?
yes.
Are you willing to cap, right? Are you willing to cap the soil remediation claim of Pepper then at 182? 182,000?
Yes.
Where's you? Okay, we're making progress. Let's vote while we're
Doing this at the board table.
We're going to vote and do away with this.
I understand that, but we've had a very difficult time getting Mr. Evers to commit to.
That is a positive. It's on the record. That's the soil contamination piece. Let's try to move forward. We've got a motion and a second on the $195,000 settlement for everything other than the soil contamination piece. I know we do have one other speaker. I forgot about that. Thank you, Mr. Evers.
Could I please
I want to move on, sir. Our staff will follow up with you after we vote. We've got one other public speaker I need to call, and then we're going to vote on this. Thank you. Next speaker is Tom Rass.
Tom Rass, I work in Seminole. You're not required to provide agendas before the meetings, but the agenda item, the agenda says that this is, the PSA recommends to approve this to cover all project-related costs over and settle all outstanding claims. My question is, when did it become clear to PSTA staff that this would not cover all claims? Again, you're not legally required to do anything, but I wonder, for a citizen sitting at home, it would be useful information to have to know whether, exactly what's happening in this meeting today. Mr. Evers, who I've never spoken to or communicated with, has re-alleged a very adversarial project management environment. He's done that twice before. In fact, he said this is worse than 33 years. In a recent email from No Tax for Trash, talked about that he would be risking future contracts by doing that. So I'm sure he doesn't take it lightly. Over at the county level, an employee was recently, how should we say, made to retire due to allegations of a hostile work environment. And these are serious allegations that Mr. Evers is making, so I wonder, will there be an investigation into this? Because if I understood correctly, this is not one of the 7 recommendations. These are my words: hostile work environment, he alleged, and adversarial project management. And Mr. Evers' experience appears to be the same as mine, which is that if you oppose PSTA, you are the enemy. Long before I questioned anything, I mean, yes, I did file suit last year against PSTA, but then when I caused your August 12th ACBT meeting to be shut down, I brought this up several times. Mr. Welch characterized it as a tactic in a Facebook post. So, if you question things that PSTA does or elected officials do, you are the enemy. You are to be yelled at and shut and be told to sit down and just take your medicine. This is the outcome you get. Mr. Newton here, who I consider a friend, laughingly asked if there had been corruption, even though I characterized it as corruption of process. And in an email to you all, I talked about that if your hard drive is corrupted, would you ask if there was any criminal activity? Of course not. It's the outcome that matters, not culpability, not mens rea, not guilt of consciousness. This is the outcome you get. This is a really bad outcome due to bad project management. And so I would argue to you that dissent, free speech leads to better outcomes. In the San Francisco Bay Area, the other Bay Area, they rely on intellectual capital. So I'm trying to tie it all together and say that if you listen to your critics, and the Roman Senate did have paid critics at times, if you listen to your critics instead of shouting down, you'd get better outcomes. So again, I want to ask, will there be an investigation into his allegations of an adversarial project management environment? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. I have no other public comments to Mr. Rask's statements about the agenda. They are on PSTA.net. Any member of the public can see the full agenda item with all the background information. The recommendations that Mr. Herbert brought forward are being looked at by staff. We said that last month. We said it again today. The other issues I don't think warrant a reply from me. I'm not going to go counterpoint on every agenda item for PSTA for the next 10 months, Mr. Rask. We have a motion and a second on this item. Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Barton.
My concern with this $195,000 payment is that this will give additional funding to Pepper that's going to drag out settling this case. And I'm reluctant to agree to it, given the fact that this will just prolong it. We really need to have a comprehensive settlement rather than a piecemeal settlement in order to make sure that this is finished.
Thank you, Commissioner Barkley. I certainly understand your concern on that. I just would remind us to look at the big picture. This is a $9 million project. It took a lot of work for us to get where we are, and mistakes have been made going back to the origination of this project. So I think we've got a path forward. I'm going to support the motion on the floor. Commissioner Newton.
Point of information, I just want to know from legal what just transpired in this. Will that be a good conclusion to this this issue before us once we do this vote? I mean, the gentleman just stood up and you asked him about numbers. He said, yeah, that we the number. I'm trying to figure out, will that take care of all this? Will this be over?
Well, what you're proving again is still carving out the soil remediation plan. I can't tell you it's done. We still have to communicate with Pepper and try to see if we can come to a resolution on the soil remediation plan.
But I'm asking about the dollar amount. He just stated, he said he would find what he supported you guys. That's on the soil, right?
Right.
The 182.
That's the max. That would require PSTA to.
That's not the motion on the table.
No, I understand it. I'm just trying to get some clarity because my colleague, Joe is saying that it's vague, but I know what this one is. Now we know what the other one may or may not be. That would conclude everything is what I'm asking legal on this issue.
I think Alan just answered that. So
I think I just, right, as best I could,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woodjowski.
Negotiations are like making sausage. And I don't think that we all have to be a part of that sausage making. I think we have a legal team and staff and, again, finance board, who are all looking at this on our behalf and have asked all of these questions. We got a nice piece of news that maybe they'll do this capping thing. It's on the record, so hopefully that gives us a great step forward. But the motion on the floor is for the $197,000, and I support that.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodjowski. Any other comments? Mr. Okay. We get the vice chair and then we're going to vote.
I just want to make sure that we know what we're voting on. The contract that is subject to approval has a section in there setting aside the environmental piece with a limit of 166 or 192? Whatever that,
I think that's 182 now.
182. So this would be with that 182 number in there.
We didn't add
We're
that to the
not,
motion.
we're not memorializing the 182. The soil contamination is to be settled, we believe, based on what Mr. Evers said, that 182 is the high end of that. But we're voting on the 195 for everything else, other than the soil contamination piece. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think the rest, you can leave the details at this point to us, and when we have a resolution that's agreed to by Pepper and preferably in writing on storm remediation claim, we'll bring back that with the details.
Anything else, Ms. Vice Chair?
Well, I just would feel more comfortable if we actually saw that language in the contract.
If the board would like, we can bring back the signed settlement agreement for approval again at the next board meeting.
Does it make a motion to accept that?
For what purpose? There'll be another agreement, or not. There may not be. I think we should deal with what's before us. It's,
I guess,
help me understand what you're trying to do.
as I understood from the discussion here, maybe I had this wrong, is that they will not accept the existing contract with the 166 language in it, but they would accept it with the 182 number in it. So if we're going to approve something that we know they won't accept, we'll be back at next.
I don't think you're approving that detail. It's not
Yeah, I think you're trying to do it.
The soil contamination number is not.
It's not part of what our agenda item.
If we can get an agreement signed that is 195 and carves out the soil remediation claim, we will sign that agreement. If we can't get that worked out, we will bring back a new agreement. If you would like, we can share the agreement with all the board members before it's executed, if we approve this item.
We should do that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Anything else before we vote? Everybody clear on what we're voting on? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion passes 14-1, if I'm counting correctly. All right, thank you all for your work on that. Next is 4C, legal services contract.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Sandy Dillon. I'm Sandy Dillon, I'm the Chief Compliance Officer. This action item is on page 37 of your packet. This is a recommendation to extend 2 legal services contracts with Bryant, Miller, and Olive, and also with Dana Sullivan. Current contracts with these 2 firms expire in March of 2015. And the reason that we're recommending the extensions are, number 1, to ensure continuity of representation throughout the UNET notice. Should the referendum pass and be successful, they would avoid disruption in representation. It also has a positive fiscal impact by extending these contracts, for an additional 5 years is what we're requesting. They will lock in the hourly negotiated rates that we have with the 2 firms. You'll see in the packet that the proposed agreements provide hourly rates for the attorneys that are very much below the market rate for those attorneys. So the step increases are about $5 to $10 per year for the 5 years of the extended contract. This recommendation was approved by the Finance Committee last week.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Mr. Vice Chair?
This did come before the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee recommended it to the board for approval.
Okay, I'll take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we do have public comments. Mr. Comrade.
Comrades, unincorporated Seminole. Mr. Zenman is a very capable attorney. I've told him that several times. I have a question about the agreement. Is it a total then, I understand, of $3.5 million, that's correct, right? total?
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed 3.5 million over 5 years. And that's a lot of money. That's 1% of your budget as it stands now. I question the size of the agreement, and again, before I go on, I want to say I consider Mr. Zitt a very capable attorney, not that he can care about my opinion, but some of the concerns I have along the lines of what I've talked about before, which is are his efforts serving the people? Does it lead to government for the people? And I question that. There are a lot of activities by board members and by PSTA staff that go, as far as I can tell, there are no comments from Mr. Zimmett on. I checked with Mr. Evers, the first time I spoke to him, whether the allegation of adversarial work, adversarial project management was one of the 7 points that he brought up with me. He said it is not. Perhaps Mr. Chairman Welch misunderstood when he said that you're addressing these issues. That is not an issue he has brought up. It's an issue I'm bringing up. And I would argue that if you don't address that issue now, if there are allegations later of let's just call it hostile work environment, those are my words, then you can be accused later, well, you knew you had allegations before, you didn't address them, you're a public agency and so forth. Again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know how these things work, but it is a concern I have. And I, like Ms. Ward-Bajolski talked about the good news, that there has been some good news, and some good news for you too, is I don't come to these meetings anymore, because it doesn't seem like you get anywhere, and I feel that the comments I make are misconstrued deliberately, frankly. And perhaps that's the outcome you want. You don't want citizen input. But as I alluded to before, if you look in the other Bay Area, you can get growth through intellectual capital. And with that comes dissension, sometimes really harsh disagreements. If you read the biography about Steve Jobs, if you want economic growth, you need free speech, you need dissension, not just misconstruing citizen comments, spinning them, accusing the citizen of spinning, etc. I know that Mr. Hyde was leading today. So I will not be coming to these meetings anymore. I won't be taking up your time. I shall incommode you no further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. You've said that before, and you're always welcome to come to these meetings, but it just is interesting to me that folks like you who can make some very stinging comments, both here, both online, on St. Pete Times, Tampa Bay Times, are so hurt when you're challenged.
Not hurt.
Well, when you make those kind of accusations, when you call this board corrupt, and when you do a whole lot of other things that I won't mention up here, I, for one, am going to challenge you on that. And so if you can't take being challenged directly on a comment you make in an open forum, you know, I can't do anything about that. But as a citizen, you're welcome to come to any meeting and state your case. I have no other cards on this issue. We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question.
Commissioner Dunn.
I have a question for Ms. Land. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Zimmett for his excellent counsel over the years on all sorts of issues to this board, and I'm new to the board, but I understand from my conversations with staff that you've done an excellent job with your work, and I know the reputation of the law firm of Bryant Fuller Olive has been outstanding. I wanted to ask a question, Ms. Land, about the decision to extend the contract 5 years, because it appears that the last time the contract was extended, it was only extended for 2 years. What was the thinking behind that? Because if we vote in favor of the extension, which I'm inclined to do because of the good reports I hear about Mr. Zimmett's work, it will be 11 years from 2009 to 2020 before this contract could potentially be put out for an RFP process again. Is that right?
Well, just to clarify, both of these contracts are actually non-exclusive. PSTA has the right to contract with any other legal firms of its choice. Additionally, legal services are specifically exempt from the requirements of the RFP process. But by extending this contract this long, it takes us through the referendum, through the, hopefully if it's successful, everything, the work that we expect after that. And it locks in the rates for that long period of time. If you look in the 5th year extension of the contracts, the hourly attorney fee is still significantly less than the current market rates of returns on 2018.
That's what I thought you would say, so. Thank you.
I'll note we have attorneys at both ends of the dial.
Good job.
Thank you, Commissioner Diamond. Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Dyson?
Yeah, I know the contract we have with our attorneys in Reddington Beach stipulate a 30-day termination clause. Do you say anything?
Yeah, there's a 30-day termination clause.
So then, we don't have to go to 2020 yet to go.
We can terminate before then.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner Dyson. Commissioner Vogel?
I don't remember the exact year, but it was before the 2 years ago. It was probably 3. We had the discussion about doing a periodic RFP of services for our attorney services. And I believe we made a policy, correct, Brad? That we would do it just so often, some type of a policy, I don't remember exactly. And I want to say it was every 10 years. Hey, my point of only saying this is to answer your question. I'm pretty sure that we do have a policy. But having said that, I understand why we're doing what we're doing right now. Because of all the things we are involved in, it would be detrimental to our operations to change counsel at this point. So I get that and I support that. But I do believe that we agreed to have, just as with our auditor, we lump those two things together because it's in the best interest of the public's money to be checking out there what's available and at what cost.
And these agreements wouldn't forbid us from doing RFP.
No, yeah, I think you're missing what I'm saying, but that's okay. Anyway,
We'll check.
anyway,
And Brad's going to double check.
yeah, but I'm in support of this because it's in our operations' best interest.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second to approve the legal services contracts. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll move to information items 5A, green light coordination with other plans. And for the last time in a while, Cassandra.
While she's pulling it up, let me just highlight, many of you probably, those of you who were on the ACPT on Monday talked about this, and the others of you probably saw the article that appeared, I think, in last Friday's paper about the Gateway, the announcement by Governor Scott of the money to build a elevated toll lane facility in and around the St. Petersburg Airport. The Florida DOT staff came to the planning committee meeting last Thursday and had a discussion with the planning committee about about their project and about how they can coordinate that with Green Light Pinellas, because our proposed Green Light rail line has a stop right at the or nearby the St. Pete Florida Airport. Cassandra, I think, has some update since our planning committee, and she's going to give a broader PowerPoint on how PSTA wants to coordinate with that project and other planning projects that are going on. But so take it away.
This is an information item, but we wanted to bring this to you because I want to tell you about all of the things that we're doing, not just Green Light, but other things that we're doing in the community that affect Green Light and some other things that don't, that our planning department is doing. Our planning department has grown to a staff of 3, including plus me. They're really very talented, and they're really very busy. I will always welcome any questions that you have about any of the projects that we are engaged in, because I think we continually do the right thing. Sometimes I don't get into all of the detail about the history of projects because it can take a lot of time. So the Gateway project in particular, there have been some changes to that Gateway project because of the funding that we have received. We're thankful as Pinellas County, we're thankful to get that money to advance any transportation project in the county. We have coordinated the alternatives analysis that was concluded in 2012 with that project. That is, you mentioned in our conceptual engineering tech memo that was finished in 2012 on page 70. So anybody can go look and see that we have coordinated with that project. As our project has changed, we become more real as we are going to a referendum in November. And this project has become more real. We are re-engaging our coordination with the Department of Transportation. They have made certain provisions in the early design, and so we're accepting those provisions, including changing the profile of their overpass of Almerton Road for this project, an additional 7 feet to accommodate the clearance of light vehicles. They have accommodated through streets from our rail station to the airport. We want to make sure that those continue. And they've also invited us to the table now to talk about the RFP. Because of the change of the way we're going from a design, bid, build, delivery process, and our CFO, David Liz, will get more into design delivery methods of projects. But the design, bid, build process is slow and leaves the risk on the public. The design build process, which is what the Department of Transportation is going to, will have a team of designers and contractors that will partner up and create designs. And so the way that we integrate our comments into what the department is doing is different now as of last month because they decided to go design build. That is the RFP process. That RFP process brought this item to you, staff called the Department of Transportation, brought this item to you. Their RFP process has not even begun. The ink is not even dry on the contract with the engineer that will be drawing up the RFP. And so we are meeting with them before we even need to make sure that these projects are coordinated. With that, I would like to talk to you about some other projects that we're working on, because this is not the only one in the region that we're aware of, or that we're coordinating with, or that will be part of what Greenlight is moving forward. We do have a lot of agencies to discuss projects with, and we realize that coordination is something that is integral to the success of our projects. We are a national example of good coordination. Every time we go to the Federal Transit Administration, we talk about PSTA and the partnerships that we've had with our other agencies in the county and in the region. We're held up as an example for other transit properties across the country. As I mentioned, the partnerships are critical, the coordination is critical. This is about efficient decision-making, about speaking with one voice, continually. We have coordinated recent projects, such as the ones listed here, as well as ones that we will continue, that includes our transit development plan, our long-range transportation plan, BRT and express study, Shape Express lanes, which was brought to ACPT earlier this week. Of course, the Gateway Express project, which did have a different name, by the way, it was the Roosevelt Express. So if you see the Roosevelt Express, it's the same project. As well as the Howard Franklin Bridge and other plans that we're moving forward with. So we also see some opportunities for coordination in our BRT, our core rapid bus corridors that were identified in the bus portion of the Greenlight plan. And so we're digging into those plans. There are lots of plans the cities have. It's not just transportation agencies that we need to be talking to. It's coordinating that land use and that transportation all together. And we really feel like all of these projects are something that we're paying attention to, but more importantly, that we are seeing the need to be a more decisive leader in that process. It's because of PSTA that the land use and transit connection is being made. As you recall, last year we did a series of charrettes for light rail stations. Those were in complete partnership, not only with the MPO who led the project, but with the local jurisdictions who were in the forefront of coordinating with the land owners and developers in those station areas. They were the primary face to the community, And so again, we're sharing responsibility and making sure that everyone is at the table. This presentation was originally supposed to tell you all of the good things that the planning department is doing and that they will continue to do, whether I'm here or not. And they are organized and they are ready to take on these new challenges. We have spoken with the MPO specifically to help fund new coordinated projects. And these we're calling the corridor master plans. And we want to talk to the MPO about making sure that all of these things and all of our responsibilities that we each have are taken care of. And so that is the original discussion at the planning committee about this particular topic. And with that, I will take any questions you have about any of the projects that you'd like to discuss.
Thank you, and this is your last meeting for a while, so thank you so much.
This is, but I will be helpful with again.
Okay.
For the track.
Okay.
So you can see mine.
Madam Secretary, your planning committee reviewed this. Do you have any comments?
I am going to turn it over to Bill, because Bill, I was sick that day,
Okay.
and Bill was nice enough to chair me.
The committee did recommend the endorsement of the staff recommendation.
Okay. Commissioner Newton?
Yes, one of the twins actually will be born.
Speaking of planning.
March 26th, so a week from tomorrow.
And I get the name Monique Unique, right?
That's right.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you for the presentation, Sandra. And yes, we did talk briefly about this at the ACPT. So I just, for the record, want to ask a question that you've already answered for me, but this is for the record. During the alternatives analysis, did the engineering firm and the committee take into account, I'm using the word take into account, very specifically for a reason, over the Gateway Connector, formerly called the Roosevelt, whatever?
Yes,
Okay, so, and it was determined that we need both.
yes. All of the work that we did in terms of our ridership estimates included this in the background roadway network. So this, in our world, this project existed when we did the design elements and the ridership estimates. We have asked the department in the past to make changes. We will continue to monitor those changes and make sure that our responsibility doesn't end when we get concurrence on our changes. It ends only when that project is built.
And the only difference today versus when the alternatives analysis was completed is that at that time, and we all know budgets and change, at that time we thought the rail would be first and the road would come after.
That is actually correct.
And so the only difference today is that the road's coming first and the rail will be coming after, providing the referendum was approved.
Yes.
It's approved.
Well, yes, that is a difference.
Okay, so again, just reiterating, erroneous information out into the Times that this road was planned for, and I think you just mentioned page 70 of the technical report.
Yes, it's
Mentions
conceptual
all of this.
engineering, technical engineering on page 7.
So it's also documented, which erroneously was mentioned earlier that it was not, that we don't have any documentation. So I think we just need to make it really clear in public that what has been reported and what is on various newsletters is completely false.
There's a lot of that going around.
So,
Always has been.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Wojcicki. Commissioner Beckman?
Yeah, I was in the meeting and that we had with the planning board. And I made a note that when the FDOT people were speaking, they said that, and this is just in support of what Commissioner Wojcicki was saying, they said, gee, the governor's approval of this sped up our time frame by about 10 years. So this was initially planned for quite a while after we were planning to have it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barton?
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. And this information is excellent. Where we are falling down is that the disinformation folks are always ahead of us. And we've got to figure out a way to get the correct information to the public in a faster way. And I'm not sure how we do that, but we really have to concentrate on this because publications such as what we saw the other day in the newspaper really hurt our cause. And we really need to make sure that we are doing everything possible to get the correct information out in a timely fashion. So whoever our public relations folks are that work with the newspapers and other sources, we've really got to work on getting that information out quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Brett?
Mr. Park, I know that, I think you were maybe there or at the meeting or maybe toward the end of it for the next meeting. But with all due respect, I just want to perhaps disagree with you. We asked for the Florida DOT to come and make that presentation. And I talked to the reporter. I was the one quoted in the article. And frankly, maybe the headline was not of my choosing, but I think it is very helpful. I know it was a very productive discussion to have. F.com, even though their project manager on this project just started working there a few months ago, to come and present to how this was going to affect Greenland. It is only helpful to coordinate these different projects. At the ACPT, which was on Monday, which is another group, FDOT came again and presented a different project, the managed lanes on I-275. And their maps did not even show the Gateway project on that same map. It is challenging, and the purpose of this presentation initially, and the discussion about the Gateway Connector with the Planning Committee, was to highlight that PSTA has a planning department, and in addition to doing marketing and outreach, which we've talked a lot about Greenlight, that we actually have a technical planning staff that works on all these different projects and tries very hard to coordinate these things. The other comment I want to just make is Cassandra is coming back. That is mandatory. I mean, people are going to miss her, but there is now in place at PSTA a full staff of planners that work with the MPO and FDOT and these others, and Cassandra will keep doing that once she returns. But it's very important for PSTA to keep working with all of these different projects, Gateway included. And, you know, I know that our opposition speaks about how in a negative way, but I think generally the public wants the different agencies to work together and coordinate these things. That's what they want.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Commissioner Barkley. Commissioner Long?
Yes, and Cassandra, I cannot stress enough how much I want you to bring that little pack and play to the office.
Two pack and plays.
In any case, I agree with everything that Brad said, but I do want to share with the committee, and I apologize, I wasn't here in the beginning when you talked, I just stood out for a minute, but it was I'm on that planning committee, and it was very disturbing to me to hear over and over again that young woman, and I know she's new, constantly say, we don't have enough information, or we don't have that information, as she looked at her sidekick sitting behind her. So I guess my question to you is, have you had an opportunity to follow up with her or him, whoever it is that's really running the show there? Because we are talking about the State Department of Transportation, and I believe that they have a big regional office right here in our area. It's astounding to me that they seem to be so out of the loop with what we're doing with all of the press and everything else that we've been talking about. And so that's very bothersome to me, because no matter how much we try and no matter how much we get the word out there, it's impossible to account for someone with their head in the sand, frankly.
Well, if I might,
Yes.
in her defense, she has been there for 4 months. She is not used to answering detailed questions about her projects from elected officials as we are. And so she may have been prepared differently and guaranteed she will be prepared differently next time.
Good.
The people sitting behind her, one of them was the former project manager. He's the one that I spoke to when I was with Jacobs during the alternatives analysis. I did speak to them immediately after that committee meeting and asked a few similar questions that you're asking now. I had a meeting on Friday with Debbie Hunt over at the Department of Transportation.
Good.
As well as Lynn Dow, who's in charge of intermodal systems development. And so they are fully aware of this project. It is a project that is at the forefront of their mind. They were a funding partner in this project. They are aware of it. They are considering it. And last night I got a call from the consultant that will be putting together the RFP. Again, that contract will be signed next week.
Wonderful.
So, we are fully in the loop and with the right people.
Good.
Thank you, Commissioner Long. Do we have agreement on moving forward with the consolidated corridor concept in coordination with the other entities? Everybody on board with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to have these bumps in the road. This is probably the biggest that I anticipated. Nobody expected it. State, what I read was that they moved the money up 20 years in the state budget. And so that, kind of threw us because as I think Commissioner Johnson said, the plan was for the rail being first and then that money would come in. Them accelerating that money is a good thing. I have some questions about the toll aspect of it, but that could even play into our express bus rapid transit. So we just have to find a way to coordinate that, and I think this is a very good approach. So you've got consensus to move forward with that. You're coming back on another item, so thank you. Next item is the Pinellas County interlocal agreement, Brad.
Okay, switching gears again to a very important element as part of the Green Line Pinellas plan and process. The County Commission voted in December, on December 10th, on an ordinance that set the date, set the item on the this coming November ballot for the Green Line Pinellas plan vote by the citizens. All along, it was known that in addition to the ordinance, we would need to have, negotiate and settle and approve of an interlocal agreement. An interlocal agreement, a contract between PSTA and the county to allow the sales tax money, which, if approved by the voters, would be collected by, at the county level and be collected by actually the county clerk and then delivered to PSTA. And this agreement, this contract, will govern how that money flows. It's a very important agreement because this is the way in which PSTA, the PSTA board, as you have voted to do, will be forced to eliminate the PSTA property tax once the sales tax kicks in. The PSTA board two sessions ago voted to ask the state to remove the power of PSTA to levy a property tax if the sales tax was approved. That was approved by large margins in the legislature and then was vetoed by the governor. Only the state, because it's part of our state enabling legislation that we have the PSTA has the power to levy a property tax, the state would have to remove that. But we can still handle this, and that's actually what the governor's veto letter said, is you can handle this locally. The way that we handle it locally is through this interlocal agreement with the county. Both Alan and I and our bond counsel have met multiple times with the county attorneys. We have another meeting tomorrow with them to negotiate this interlocal agreement, and I am confident that we both agree on the clause in the contract that eliminates the PSTA ad valorem. What it does is says that the county will withhold equal amounts of sales tax dollars for any ad valorem property tax dollars that any future PSTA board might levy. Of course, it's never going to happen, I don't think, under my watch or any of your watch that we would levy a property tax, but we're trying to create a very long-term agreement. And until the state, and we will keep trying to get the state to remove that power, but until the state does remove the power, a future PSTA board might levy a ad valorem property tax, and if they ever did, the county would withhold the sales tax money. So there would be no incentive for a PSTA board to do that, because there would be no additional funds. That's already in the agreement. I'm going to just quickly walk through about the other major items in the interlocal agreement, so you're aware of them. This is an information item. We're scheduled. We've agreed with the county to try to get this done and approved by May. So at your May PSTA board meeting will be an action item, hopefully, to approve this interlocal agreement, and at a county commission meeting in the month of May. I'm going to talk about 4 main issues. The first being sort of the overarching issue, and then the other ones are subsidiary. The big issue is exactly how this sales tax, this transportation surtax, should be considered or treated in this interlocal agreement by the county. And a model for how a surtax is handled is penny for Pinellas. As those of you who are city council members know, that 40% of the current penny for Pinellas is given by a formula to the cities that you sit on, and that you included for capital infrastructure projects. That revenue pays for infrastructure projects in your city, in your CIP of your city budget. There are no strings that the county attaches to that funding. It flows to Safety Harbor or Bel Air Bluffs, and it's up to the cities, or to St. Petersburg, and then it's up to the cities to spend that money wisely. If they have extra money over because the projects were under, they can spend it on other projects. Or if they go over, it's up to that council to deal with the situation. There's essentially no strings on that. The reason, or the justification about that no strings approach, at least that the county attorney has suggested, is because there's a 10-year renewal on that penny for Pinellas. Every 10 years, the county does have a say, because the county commission gets the opportunity to decide whether to renew going to the voters again on that sales tax. A little bit different than the Green Lake Pinellas sales tax. However, there are 2 issues that perhaps make the sales tax for transit somewhat like the penny for Pinellas, and perhaps even more oversight and county input than the penny for Pinellas has today. Number 1, and we have reached agreement on this just recently, the sales tax that people will be voting on this November is on the Green Light Pinellas plan. And it is only on the Green Light Pinellas plan. The attorneys have agreed that for anything that is not contemplated in the Green Light Pinellas plan, the sales tax money, that if the citizens approve of that, cannot be spent. It can only be spent on items identified in the Green Light Pinellas plan. That generally includes the significant expansion of the bus system and the proposed rail system. I believe, in addition, it would include the future extension, as the alternative analysis recommended, the rail system over to Tampa if Hillsborough comes along. But it would not it could not be spent on other projects that are not in the Green Light plan, like a rail system like Oldsmar has suggested to Tampa, some different project way out into the future that we don't even know about, like a monorail or something, or other projects like bike trails or anything else. It's not in the Green Light Pinellas plan, because the ordinance was written, and it's very important the way we're presenting it to the public as they are funding the Green Light Pinellas plan. That is what the funding is for. So at the conclusion, way out in the future of the completion of the capital improvements of the Green Light Pinellas plan, there will be certainly discussion of someday into the future about what additional projects might be next, and the county will have and perhaps even the voters will have to vote on something else. So there is that sort of, I wouldn't describe it as a complete sunsetting because we have to pay for the operations of the services, but it essentially is a sunset on additional projects beyond the Green Light Pinellas plan. The other issue, which is different than the penny for Pinellas, is that we have the MPO, and we also have agencies like T-BARDA, both of which have Pinellas County Commissioners on them that oversee, and we have to coordinate and include all of the Green Light projects in the MPO's plans, and on a larger basis, the T-BARDA plans. Not to mention, of course, there are 4 county commissioners on the PSTA board that get into great details about concrete and other substances. The next issue that is being discussed, that we're discussing with the county about a sort of string to be attached to the Green Light Pinellas plan that the county commission would approve in this interlocal agreement are milestones. In Penny for Pinellas, there's also an interlocal agreement with each city. There's no milestones in that one. But this one, we're contemplating including milestones. And I would actually recommend that we do include milestones because I think it does speak to an accountability for us implementing the Green Light Pinellas plan, and the voters, that would help the voters feel comfortable that we are accountable to meeting milestones as we've already presented as part of the plan to be that we will follow. Of course, the milestones need flexibility. We are obligated, and I think it's the board's desire to seek public input, despite maybe what some folks believe we try to do. We do try to get public input and listen, and we do make adjustments based on what the riders and citizens want for our services, and that will happen over time. That will continue to happen over time. So the milestones will be somewhat broad. I don't think they're going to say you shall have a bus rapid transit on Ulmerton Road by such and such a date in great detail, but there will be milestones that we're developing now about the rail and the bus improvements suggested in the interlocal agreement. The second, and I've already kind of touched on this, is about what happens beyond green light, way out in the future. And I show a picture here of the adopted City of Oldsmar downtown plan, which has taken a European train and graphically put the word Oldsmar on it. And their plan is to have a commuter rail type service someday from Oldsmar to Tampa, mainly in Hillsborough County, but in Oldsmar. And when I spoke to the Oldsmar City Council, they're very interested in us looking at their proposed system and being supportive of it. But that's not in the Green Light Pinellas plan, as you know. It might be a great project out into the future. There might be other great projects out into the future. When I speak of future, I'm talking about 35 or 40 years from now. The Green Light Pinellas plan will issue debt, and you're going to hear a brief presentation on perhaps a public-private partnership that will last for 35 or 40 years. So it's somewhat difficult to even imagine, and not really very logical, for an interlocal agreement to be signed by the county and PSTA in 2014 that can contemplate what the County Commission of 2050 and the PSTA Board of 2050, even I will not be here in 2050, will want to do or think is needed for the community. And so, obviously, the vote will be by citizens, will be on the Green Light Pinellas plan, and the interlocal agreement will only cover the Green Light Pinellas plan. Beyond Green Light, or Green Light 2, another rail line, or something just that we haven't even contemplated now, will be up to voters and that county commission then, not us. Last but not least, and I'm very happy that the discussions with the county so far have confirmed this, is there's a suggestion, and the first drafts by the county, where the PSTA pay for everything, every expense the county might ever have related to Green Light. Attorney fees and legal fees, all infrastructure impact costs that they might ever have related to the Green Light Plan or development that occurred around the Green Light Plan. And perhaps instead of that approach, and I think the county is supportive of not going down that road, but instead engaging the county as a partner to help us successfully implement the Green Light Pinellas plan. One model that I learned about, that we learned about from Denver, that they did when they passed their sales tax, and their funding flows not from the county but from the state. They agreed in their interlocal agreement to pay for one or two project engineer type people in the Colorado DOT that are there to work 100% on the transit, the Denver transit projects, and permitting and coordination, kind of like we just discussed with the Gateway, that are with the DOT, but they're working to help implement the transit improvements. Perhaps that would be a better approach. We would pay for county staff, engineering staff, that would help work on all of the different projects that might be needed to be coordinated into the future. Those people could work to minimize the costs that would to the county to make sure that would be effective. I think there is strong agreement and a commitment by the county executive and the attorneys to work with us to make the Green Light Pinellas plan very successful. Again, this is still being negotiated. We have a meeting tomorrow with the attorneys again. Last but not least, I just want to make sure that what we're really focused on with the county is making sure that whatever we do, we don't harm our ability to implement the Green Light Pinellas plan. That's critically important. We don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our credit rating for issuing debt or our ability to acquire federal funds because the county has an ability to take the money away or something like that. Some kind of provision that would allow the county, that would jeopardize the funding source, that would limit the ability of PSTA and the county in the future to implement the plan that the voters vote on. And there's a general agreement on that principle to do no harm, but the devil is obviously in the details about how that exactly gets worked out in language.
Thank you, Brad. The interlocal is a very important document. Everything that we talked about this at ACPT, but my conversation with the county administrative attorney is that the meetings are going well. And really the main issue is to have a document that locks in the implementation of Green Light Pinellas.
Yeah.
And it also gives us another way to make sure that there's no double taxation with the PSTA ad valorem. So we definitely don't want to over-restrict the PSTA, and I'll certainly, in my meetings with the administrator and attorney, convey that. But they've been very positive so far. We just need to make this happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Questions from the commission? Okay. Commissioner Laval?
I had this conversation with Bob and the attorney, but I didn't get the answer that made me comfortable. I'm concerned that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there will be a technology change that isn't reported because we don't know about it. And you'll have to go back out to referendum, and there's no problem with that really. But it's a technical change. We'll be doing the same thing, but it'll be called something different. It's not in the plan because we didn't know that word or we didn't know that technology. And I have concern about that. Is there any ambiguity in the language?
And
Or is it?
you asked a good question, but the problem isn't really in the plan. The problem is with the state statute that defines the use for surtax. So if that new mode of transportation does not come within the terms utilized in the state statute, that's more likely going to be the problem, than necessarily the problem with the plan.
They didn't say that. Okay.
Okay, so that's what would concern me, because the statute has some specific terms, like it uses guideway, things of that nature. So, there could be a new mode of transportation that would not come within the statute. In which case, the statute would have to change, and then that would require a referendum. Probably we'd have to go to referendum.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Laval. Anything else on this item? Thank you. Commissioner Wall?
I just want to say, this is very important because this will hopefully help alleviate the biggest concern that everyone has with regard to a double tax, with regard to retaining the ad valorem tax on top of the 1% sales tax. So hopefully this will alleviate that concern and sort of cut off that negative factor that right now is in the mind's eye of many detractors of Greenland Canal's program.
Thank you, Commissioner Barton. Thank you, Brad. Let's move on to 5C, capital project delivery methods. Ms. Leos.
Good morning again, and this is a good lead into, we're going to be going, as we go through the PSTA's Greenlight Canals plan, one of the things that I have to look at, and we all have to look at, is how do we best deliver the plan to the organization. So there's going to be many ways that we can deliver this plan. It's going to be through grant funding, it could be through bonding, it could be through many different avenues, including what Brad had brought up, which is public-private partnership, better known as P3. And what is a P3? It's a cooperative venture between a public entity and private sector entities. It's for the delivery of a project and the provision of services or both. It's governed by a contract that's designed to optimize the role of each entity in the allocation of project risks. Now, Brad had brought up Denver as an example. Denver currently has what's known as the Eagle P3 project. It's for the design, build, finance, operate, maintain, which is a type of P3. And it goes to one contractor. So instead of doing, which we'll go through in a second, individual phases of design, going out to contract again for then the actual construction, and then possibly either operating and maintaining the system yourself or outsourcing that. What they looked at was a holistic approach of design, build, finance, operate, maintain to one contractor or concessionaire, as they call it. And their project is going to be opening in a couple of years. I found this very exciting, very interesting, because their project is in similar size to what we're proposing, for approximately $2 billion. And so far through the construction phase, they have saved $300 million as an estimate. It's very important to the CFO, very important to the organization, because then we can finally utilize those funds elsewhere to improve bus service or utilize the savings in continued operations. So what are some of the benefits of a P3? Well, in the P3, there's benefits in the sense that there are milestones that are out there that need to be met. So there's strong incentives to achieve those milestones in an effective, efficient manner. Through this, there's going to be stability of cash flows through what's known as availability payments. Essentially, when you have a P3, you have what you can consider a lease payment. It's going to be stable payments throughout the contract period, which may be approximately 35 years, as Brad said. What's also important is we have the maintenance and future capital renewal replacements are fully funded. And the life cycle efficiencies are realized. Generally, when you do a project, you'll have high capital costs that come up, and then they drop off. You have a year of warranty, and then things go on where you have low payments. And all of a sudden you realize, perhaps I should have been spending more time on that, as we've talked about in the past, on the maintenance of the project, so then it goes up in cost. What this does, because the P3 partnership, they have to provide at the end of that term their assets back to you in the same way you gave them to them. So they have a real good incentive to be able to keep and maintain in state of good repair all of our assets. And it also helps with the stability of cash flows. And then the payments
by us or the public owner would be not be viewed as debt, but as a binding obligation. And that's important from the standpoint of when we issue bonds. This does not be considered as debt, so it doesn't go against the additional bonds test. And then you also have equity investors, which will see the debt providers are at risk if the payments are not earned. Before I get into the next slide, which is very pictorial of the P3, one thing I wanted to point out is one of the risks that we retain in the P3 is the demand risk. So we build the rail system, but we are at risk if the demand is not there based on what we had anticipated. Ernst & Young had gone through multiple different scenarios on different things, so I feel comfortable as one of these options as we go forward. And the other thing that was very important to me as a public transit rider and someone in the public transit industry is we retain the authority to set the fares for the public. I think that's very important as well. If you take a look at the pictorial here of what a P3 is, in the very bottom left-hand corner, you have the least amount of risk that we've taken all the risk, we haven't pushed anything up. We also have the least amount of budget certainty, and that's called a design, bid, build. And in that, we do 100% of the design, we bid it out, we take the construction, and there's in a complex type environment of building rail lines, this may have some risk of delays during the process, etc. As we go up the chart, you can see all the way to the design, build, finance, operate, maintain, where most of the risk is pushed off to other entities, and our budget certainty becomes greater. And this is, again, just sort of in writing here, you can see all the different players that are involved. Government entity, which in this case would be PSTA, we would issue tax-exempt debt. Now that tax-exempt debt will have lower costs than it would for the public entity, and I'm bringing that up because you'll see later on what happens. So we go out, we do 100% design, we go to the contractors, the vehicle suppliers, and we operate and maintain or hire on an operator. In what I would call the ultimate of the P3, you have design, build. So we go to 30% design in-house, and that's called preliminary engineering. And then it goes out to this contractor or contractors under a single concessionaire agreement. And the way that they get funded, and they do all the funding or most all the funding, because there still may be some bonding involved at our end, is they do private activity bonds and they find equity investors. Those people keep the pressure on to keep the milestones going, because the contractor still has to keep paying interest for every day that goes by. So again, just making sure I've covered everything there. And why I'd like for us to take it, at least look at this and explore this as we go over the next few months. It quantifies cost and risk, and one of the things that we will have to do if we decide to go on this road is what is the monetary value? When you look at the costs and the risk, is there savings? Should we proceed forward with it? One of the things that we talked about was innovations. We said what happens if 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, something happens. Well, one thing that P3 is there's all sorts of innovations they can bring to the table. And they also have efficiencies that create the savings. And I think this is also our opportunity within Pinellas County, within the region, to take a look at such things as not only our operational requirements, but local job training, training for veterans. We have a significant amount of veterans in this area. And then looking at what time incentives do we put forward so that we can keep this on track, no pun intended. Are there any questions on P3, on a brief overview?
Thank you so much for that overview. And so the plan is to continue this analysis through November?
We'll continue this analysis, and I think it's a great opportunity for the board to bring forth any of their ideas, issues, or concerns. One thing that we brought up in the Finance Committee is how do we look at this in savings from labor? And that's certainly something that can be written into contracts. Labor from an outside force would then be, they would have to pay the same labor rates that we would be paying here. So those are concerns we have to take.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and this has been reviewed by the Finance Committee, Finance Performance, and this will, Planning Committee, I'm sorry. And you'll come back to them with future presentations and updates? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments, Commissioner Murs?
Yes, thank you very much. It was excellent. A couple of questions. And since it's in the discussion phase, I appreciate the ability to have, some pre-discussion possibilities. In the design, build, finance, operate, and maintain option that you provided, what does the operate and maintain cover? I mean, currently we operate and maintain the buses and whatnot. Would that take that away from us, or would that be an addition to?
That would be one of the options, is to outsource that through a contractor for them to do the operation and maintenance, just as we're doing on the bus line. It's one of the options. Another option is to retain that in-house.
Okay. I guess as a follow-up, the P3s, I think personally, I think that there's a good operational mix there that can be obtained. I think as part of what Commissioner Barkley was also saying about education, when you say P3, I think it's important that we make sure that people know that we will be reviewing prior P3s that have been attempted in the area, and to be able to discuss it. I mean, the desal plant was a very interesting one. Ended up well, of course, but there was a lot of growth and some additional costs associated with it. And same thing with the reservoir. And there have been other programs which have been worked on, and there were technology differences, there were various things that were part of that. But I think if the public understand that we were reviewing what was done in the past, and also coming up with reasons that had occurred, how we will be addressing it, how we will prevent that from happening from this one, I think that will help reduce some of the concern as well in pursuing that. And then the last thing I would just like to mention is, in one of the slides, you mentioned a disadvantage of the key disadvantage of this DBFOM. And that was that local firms may struggle to compete with the prime contract against large firms. I think if we ended up going down that path, we should make an attempt to bring in local firms, whether it's a stated percentage or something like that, so there is some economic development locally in conjunction with this operation.
And I think, that's where the exciting part is, to be able to do public education, public training, to look at what our needs may be down the road. And I think, Brad, one of the P3s that you had looked at, and maybe it was Denver, spent a lot of time and effort in the local community to be able to build a workforce that would be able to handle what the future needs would be.
Yeah.
So that, I think that's a very exciting piece of what we can be part of in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mertz. Commissioner Newton?
Yeah, good presentation, and look, you're dead on with the local impact, economic impact. We've, some of us on the PSTA board went down and saw a P3 in Port of Miami to I-95 tunnel project, and the way it was done and the breakdown they gave us. So I'm happy that there's a lot of P3s already out there that we can benchmark against to look at some of them, what was good, what was bad, and how to adopt it and make it more amenable to the local people to be involved with the projects that we do going forward. But it's definitely a good model, and it does work. That's to defray some of the cost, some of the risks, and it gets you the capital improvements that you need without being 100% liable for everything going on. So it's a good model, good presentation.
We're also doing this in Maryland with the light rail line, so we can also look to them. And I think, to your point, lessons learned from other areas of what went well and what didn't go well. Why reinvent the wheel when we can learn?
That's right. Roll with it.
Thank you, Commissioner Newton. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Leos. We appreciate it. We'll move on to 5D, Training Providers Advisory Committee.
The next question is access. I would like to give that report for John Miller. He is doing something else that the planning department is working on, which is our repair card policy. working with other departments around the agency to make sure we have a seamless integration of that. So if I might, I will just give you a brief overview of the Riders Advisory Committee, which was discussed and established as part of our accountability plan and delivery of the Green Line Pinellas Plan. This is one of two committees that would be constructed. They had their first meeting earlier this month on March 11th. We had probably about 80% of them come. So there were a couple that we had to reach out to and make sure that they do fulfill their attendance requirements. But we had some good introductions of them, people from all over the county, some new folks who have never been involved in things like this before. We're very excited to hear what they have to say. Some of our major topics of discussion were just having them introduce themselves, but also the staff turned out in force. A lot of directors, managers, about 40 staff members came to introduce themselves, tell each of the track members what they do for the agency, and welcome any questions that the track members may have. One of our bigger discussions was talking about the committee roles and responsibilities. While you're hearing from staff today, in the future you will hear from the chair of that committee. They're getting to know each other, and so selecting the chair might take a meeting or two. But we would like them to give the report at the beginning of your board meeting so that you can hear from the public on the decisions that are in front of the board. We also gave them a list of things that they might be interested in learning about, and certainly we will bring the action items that will come before the board to them, but also have them tell us what they'd like to know more about, whether that's about training or customer service, or any of the things that we do. And we also made it open for them to take a tour of the facility. They did have a discussion of bylaws as well as an ethical and legal review of sunshine law, public records, and the things that they need to be aware of in order to act as a committee that will be making recommendations to this board. So I have great hope for them as a good group. I'm very excited that this planning department will be supporting them.
Thank you, Ms. Porters. Any questions or comments?
Did we get at the first meeting, was it a representative from North County? Did they get one at the first meeting?
We had the two representatives from North County, and we are seeking the third, which is the alternate. So we do have advertisements on our buses right now. We have received a couple of applications for those trying to fill a spot as an alternate to keep committee continuity, but ensuring that we do have full geographic diversity on the committee.
North of Clearwater, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, the members from North County at this point are from Dunedin, and so we'd like to find something a little north of that.
That's north of Palm Harbor, right? Dunedin?
Oh, no.
It's in Pasco County, actually.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Thank you, sir. Anything else on that item? Thank you, Cassandra, and we will see you in July. I know we're going to lose some members, so I'm going to try to move through the rest of the agenda. 6A PSTA performance reports.
Is in your packet. I would just note, I think it was maybe mentioned before, that PSTA celebrated Driver Appreciation Day yesterday. I learned it was created in the Seattle area. I'm not sure if there's an enormous number of cities participating besides Pinellas County and Seattle, but they wanted to, and we appreciate our drivers.
Absolutely. Capital projects update, 6B.
Also, in your packet, this is a summary of every status of every single one of our some 60 capital projects underway, and the Finance Committee reviewed this as well.
Any questions on either 6A or B? Okay, let's move to future meeting subjects.
It's on the very back page of your packet, and I should just note that the next meeting, your next PSTA board meeting, April 23rd, is at 6 p.m. The PSTA board approved having 2 of the 12 meetings a year in the evening to try to allow people that couldn't come to the morning meetings to come at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Other business? Okay, let's move to board member